Alright guys, let's see who comes back from the last stream. We're going to be talking about Marvel the last few years, Axel Alonso out, and CBN. And, I took a little break there, answered a few messages, used the bathroom, got a little drink. I'm here. And first of all, this is one of the ones where I'm going to be like dropping dimes. Usually in my videos, I talk about comic book history. I'm talking about the books, the characters, creators, things behind the scenes that I've heard through the grapevine since I was a kid, things I read in Amazing Heroes and Wizards and interviews. I even have newspaper clippings that came out during the Crisis on Infinite Earths when it made the newspapers about what they were changing their universe. Hey, what's up, Tim? Hey, Northern Monkey. Hey, buddy. So this video, first of all, there'll be nothing personal said. And I'm going to steer away about using the term SJW because I've learned a whole lot over the last year that I'm not going to be sitting here, and I hate terms like snowflake and things like that. But it's going to be like me shooting because we lived through the history. We have lived through the Axel Alonso era of Marvel that I cannot see anybody looking back on favorably. Okay, and there's been articles out. I've retweeted some of them on Twitter just so that I can go back and read them, and it's the most amazing freaking damage control I've ever seen, and it's bullshit just to put it out there and stuff, right? That Marvel has nowhere to go but up. Last Friday, today's the 22nd, so whatever that was, last Friday here in November, it came out that Alex Alonso was out. The fiscal year report came out. The Disney stockholders, they have to answer to them. Yeah, the cowboy accent. It's Appalachian accent. I'm not a redneck. I'm a mountain man. I got a Rorschach t-shirt on. So, yeah. The flannel doesn't help. But anyway, so I actually got to live through this thing going with Marvel and saw how it was interpreted. Saw articles coming out how they reported it and how things were biased and twisted and not what was going on. I got to see the whole comics gate, which that's just a term of reference. I don't think this is a big movement. I've seen on Twitter how before it became big and stuff, was actually attacked, dismissed, and insulted by comic book creators on Twitter, which blew my mind. I didn't know that kind of stuff went on. So we're going on 2-3 years of seeing this thing really get out of hand and blow up. And so do you think we'll still get a solid reboot from Marvel? I'm just glad you're not slamming SJW stuff. Yeah, and that was part of the problem. That's one. Let me start from the beginning here for me, right? You can go back, and I have a video where if I could, in good conscience, I'm not one of those people who want to cover up my past on here. YouTube to me, as a YouTube channel, I've tried to stay positive and talk about comics and books and stuff, and had a pretty good reputation there for quite a while, and I was actually kind of big there for a little bit. And I've had comic book creators, and a few of them actually watch my stuff. I got contacted by 2 people who work at Marvel, and with all due respect to one of them, who's a great guy, the other guy, I was really surprised to get a message from him out of the blue telling me about the fiscal report, telling me the same thing this other person that works at Marvel told me. Really no big. And over the years, I've been contacted by the Philip Wiley, well, contacted, but commented on it. I've had some creators direct message me over the years, as small as this channel is, and I thought it was pretty cool. We used to do live streams before they were Google Hangouts, or right when Google Hangouts started, where we had Gail Simone pop in and watch a few of them and kind of comment on some of them. She just kind of found us and got curious as how I felt about it. To my understanding, I saw the comment from her. Kevin Rubio has watched one of my videos where I'm talking about CAG and Tag and Bink. Said he was glad I liked the book. Michael Avon Oming, I put my foot in my mouth, going back on that one, and I can name some other people. So I actually know that I have a few comic book creators that check out my channel, as some of them do with all these little channels, no matter how small you are. Do you think Disney knew what Axel was doing? And I'm going to get to that, right? So last year when Marvel was just going downhill, and I know I worked in a comic book shop in the 90s. There's comic book shop owners I've known since like late 80s, early 90s. I know these people. I know what Marvel does, that, Marvel is 52% of their income and things like that, right? So if Marvel's not strong, the industry's not strong. And I was looking at it from a point of view of these are people with families. They've been in business. It's going to affect them. It's going to hurt families with what Marvel was doing in the sales and the stacks of books I saw. And I made a video where I said who was killing the comics. And I kind of would like to go back and change the title of that and take that SJW term out of it. But what is said in that. And I was getting contacted before that. I have videos leading up to that. I was getting contacted by SJWs and things like that. And then I met more of them, and then I started noticing you can't put them all under an umbrella. They're extremists, and there are people who are really wanting good things to happen in the world. You get what I'm saying? So it was a learning experience for me, and I'm not going to cover up my past. You know what I mean? It's a personal decision. It's not worrying about public opinion. So that's why I'm not going to change them. But you talk about going down the rabbit hole and the things that I got away from, things I avoided, the temptation I avoided. My channel, I think, really could have been huge if I kept going down that track, but it just wasn't, for me, the right thing to do. So there's nothing personal going to be said about Axel Alonso, CB, Dan Slott, Heather Antos, all these people that, if you're aware of what's going on, it'll just blow your mind. I'm just going to state the facts as I've seen them. It was a learning experience, and watching this stuff, seeing this part of comic book history go on. I've heard multiple people say that the Marvel is the strength of the industry. How did the company get into that position? Well, okay, Murdoch, maybe I can answer that a little bit. Basically, Marvel came out, and it was in the 60s. We'll just go through the history here, and we'll get up to what's going on. In the 60s, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, Don Heck, Gene Colan, Jim Starlin, or in the late 70s, I meant to say Jim Steranko, and a whole bunch of people started making these comics that all of a sudden were so different from how comics were perceived and what the subject matter was before. They brought about the idea of a shared universe and continuity and a solid stories and counterculture and stuff, right? I haven't seen Thor Ragnarok. I have not seen the movie yet. Who knows? Who knows when I'll see it? I have Marvel movie fatigue. That's all there is to it. But anyway, so DC built their fan base, and Stan Lee, giving him credit where credit is due, knew exactly how to talk to these people through his editorials and through his editor's notes and his Stan soapbox and through interviews and things like that. The man knew how to talk to people. He was a freaking PR machine and stuff. So you felt like you were part of the Marvel army. They had all these little clubs and stuff that you could be part of, like Boom and stuff like that. So it was just an amazing article. But it always came down to the comics. The comics were solid. They had the Marvel style of writing and stuff, and it was spontaneous and new, and they were smart and things like that. And they just built it up to where they had a fan base to the point where DC Comics at the time were saying these artists are sloppy. Marvel was built by losers. I mean, seriously, these were people who were scrambling for work and had, they weren't the norm. All right, guys, I hear something downstairs. If somebody, comes at me, I'll turn the camera around. But anyway, so they just built their fan base and stuff, and then the direct market started hitting in the late 70s, early 80s and things, and Jim Shooter came up. And Jim Shooter just had been raised and trained by people at DC Comics since he was like 13. They didn't know how old he was when he started writing, sending in stories for Legion. And he just knew the business. And he came in, and he was the first person that the printing press said that since you came on, Jim, all our books are shipping and printing on time. And it just kind of grew. He was all about story first, and that's when the X-Men became big and teams came up and things like that. They were a house of ideas. So basically it was just Marvel, putting out quality books and Stan Lee making you feel like you were part of Marvel. That's oversimplifying it. It's all about personal opinion and stuff, right? So people would come in for their X-Men books, and they would come in for their John Byrne. They would come in for their Spider-Man. They were always kind of, what people didn't know is how much they were sort of struggling to be bigger. Build themselves up to where they had this vision of the movies and stuff, right? And that's the thing that kind of happened because the '90s boom hit. Where the bubble about bust and Marvel just about went bankrupt, and Joe Quesada comes in, and they started like abandoning slowly their continuity and characters started acting out of character, and they started bringing in people who, though they were talented and could tell stories, they really didn't know these characters or their Marvel history. And what do? They say it's Skrull invasion, So that was their get out of jail free card. And then eventually, um, we get to around 2011 where Axel Alonso takes over. Axel Alonso did some great stuff. Are you oh, thanks, man. Um, Somebody's telling me I'm super insightful. Thank man. I've just collected comics books a long time, and I love everything about them. History, gutters, everything, all of it. But anyway, Axel Alonso comes in, and what started happening for whatever reason, this era and stuff. It was about the events. It was about selling books. All of a sudden, Disney had bought out. Disney bought Marvel. Is what happened, which was which I thought was hilarious, because Disney used to have something called Disney XD, and they had some of the '90s Marvel cartoons, and Marvel did not like how the Disney XD was not promoting those cartoons and how they were scheduling the cartoons, so they sued Disney. And then all of a sudden the Iron Man movie came out. Now, from my point of view, being on the outside of this, it was sort of like Disney's like, Marvel's suing us? What's going on here? It's like they really wouldn't have thought too much about them. And then they saw the success of the Iron Man movie, the Hulk movie, so on and so forth, and Disney bought them. Now all of a sudden you have fiscal reports, you have quarterly reports, and you're owned by a conglomerate that got, different things were coming out and being said to us. I don't know what works in the office. Ethan Van Sciver, I'll get to that. That's pretty cool, man. I'll get to all this, man. These are good questions, man. I can keep going. So Axel Alonso comes in, and all of a sudden it seems like there's going to be an event. And before the event, with all the comic books coming in, they're already announcing the next event. These events meant nothing. These events were not as successful as they said they were, because they would just be undone. Every event from Civil War, before Axel Alonso was on there as editor-in-chief and stuff, but Civil War, Siege, as you go up and down, anything that was done in those books were undone. And they were undone badly. Civil War, everybody knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man. Year later, it was nothing. We had one more day. He wasn't even married. So you have like 25 years of comics that were like, never happened, is what they're saying. Anything, they're saying they just didn't need a good explanation. And people were starting to pick up on hypocrisy with Marvel and stuff. You can't smoke in a Marvel comic. You can't be married in a Marvel comic, but by God, you can make a deal with the devil. I mean, strange things like that. People were picking up the hypocrisy. Yeah, I know about Dan Slott in that fight with Doug Ernst on Twitter. I know more than I should know. Bill Jamis, somebody's bringing up Bill Jamis and Joe Quesada. There's a lot of history there, and you're absolutely, Bill Jamis and Joe Quesada era, yeah. Continuity, and Quesada brought it back. Good point there, Eric Breen. Eric Breen had a good comment in there. You can't marry or smoke. Yeah, there's a no policy of no smoking in the Marvel comics there for a while. And there seems to be this thing that they just look at the married characters. They split them up. They turn the wives into monsters. They kill them. There's not a lot of marriage going on there. Yeah. I see. Do you think that DC, if they keep doing what they're doing, both with Rebirth and social media, will come to new strength in industry should Marvel fail to climb back up on top? I think they got a good shot. I think DC has a good shot. Didn't Disney buy Marvel? Yeah, that's what I said. I think it was around 2009, and that's part of what I think's been going on. So Disney buys Marvel, and we have all these events, and people are complaining about event fatigue. And then the strangest thing started happening 2-3 years ago, and this is where I watched, and I was one of the people that, I'm not saying I was at the forefront. I mean, the stuff with some of these creators on Twitter, I come to find out was going all the way back to 2012 and 13 and stuff. Mr. Miracle run that's going on right now, what are my thoughts? It's fantastic. It's amazing. It's amazing. I don't know if it's going to be considered a classic. I don't think if we're having a new Watchmen or Dark Knight, but we're having something to where that book is definitely going to have a cult following going into the future. That's what I think. Tom King's Mr. Miracle is really good. So Axel Alonso comes, is editor in chief, and all of a sudden these oh, there's too much change at once. Female Thor coming on. The problem with that is that people approached it with a critique. I watched this. I watched this on my circle. I saw this. And one of the critiques they had was like, Thor is a name, not a superhero title. You can't really make it a legacy title. It would be, seriously, it would be me walking up to you saying, hi, my name's David now, when it's not. Yeah. People are like talking about Dan Slott right now and stuff. Feel free to talk amongst yourselves. I might get to it here, right? So there's a lot of change going on, but it's one thing to change the characters in the books and stuff. Female Thor, Sam Wilson, Captain America, and all the stuff they were doing. It was too much at one time. Okay, and it was that's the real thing that was hurting the industry. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna kind of keep talking. People have some really good points here, right? I'm sitting here and I've repeated myself like 3 times here, right? But they came in and I think it was too much change at one time. But the difference was is that the Marvel that I described at the beginning, they even where they were with the fans, they would acknowledge the fans, maybe listen to the fans. They even like threw a bone to the fans. If a fan brought up continuity errors, you submitted in a letter the error in continuity, but you would come up with a logical reason that it happened to make it kind of work, and they would send you an empty envelope called a no prize. And on the envelope, it would say, "Welcome, here's your no prize," from Stan Lee for helping out with continuity. They still made it part of the fans, and Marvel seems to abandon that. Oh, it's cool, man. Oh, don't worry about it, Detective 29. Keep asking. Comic Crypt is here. Comic Crypt will remember the great Silver and Bronze Age of Marvel and stuff that I described before. Go check out Comic Crypt's channel, man. But so anyway, they get in and that's what they were abandoning. And all of a sudden, there's like this whole movement with Marvel. Don't forget how Marvel's making the female characters like dudes. Yeah, yeah, that's all been covered with other stuff, man. Maybe I'll get there and stuff. That's part of the changes that's going on. But all of a sudden, Marvel was trying to get an invisible audience in that does not collect comics. And if you were of a certain age and a certain gender, they were actually telling you, go if you don't like it, go somewhere else. You have to accept these books aren't for you. Certain things that they have a point with, but the feelings of an attack and an abandonment of people who were loyal customers for years, people were still looking at it as a business decision. Is my money not good enough for you? And they saw the writing on the wall. You're turning down money is how people were seeing it, but they wanted to talk about ideologies and things like that, and it got really out of hand. There was 2 arguments going on. So all of a sudden, and then people were talking about like you got a Twitter with a bunch of followers because you're putting you work for Marvel up there, but they were saying this was their personal account. Well, you've got your business, freelance or not, contract work or not. People were calling out the hypocrisy of that. You've got a bunch of followers because of your job, of the minor celebrity that comes with working in comic books, and you're attacking fans. And over the last 3 or 4 years, there's been plenty of videos made and plenty of articles that have started coming up of these creators going after critics and YouTubers and slamming them and trying to shut down stuff. It's making it a very ugly environment. And at the same time, they're trying to chase off an audience so they can have an invisible audience. They started wanting creators started. Do you feel that the fall of Axel needed to be so bitter? I don't know. I don't know if it should have been bitter. But all of a sudden, the things that I started seeing, and Dan Slott was one of them. Like I said, not a personal attack. I actually saw this, but they started determining who should and should not be a comic book fan. Okay, I want you to take that in. They're dictating who should be reading comics and stuff like that. Yeah, there's been a lot of things that have been thrown out with the critics over the last couple of years. My favorite comic book movie, you're going to laugh, but it's American Splendor. And it's funny you said that because might be watching this tonight. Watchmen and then American Splendor. I got a bunch over there. Sin City 2 is probably, I like Sin City. And all the way back to the Tim Burton and the Batman and the Batman from '66 that I have around here somewhere. But it was just amazing how this was just becoming a big. Marvel started getting like this bad reputation. These people were representing Marvel, yet they were trying to have a loophole of how they acted towards fans, and they could say anything they could because it's their personal social media. The only business I know that does that. When you start telling fans what they want instead of reacting to the market, you're poisoning your own well. Yeah, I want to say if you don't acknowledge what the fans want, you know, don't laugh, but I enjoy Iron Man 2. I'm not going to laugh. I'm not going to laugh. I'm a Mickey Rourke fan, and he's made some terrible movies that I love. So basically, you have people who just like, hey, this is a hobby. I've been buying comics for decades or years, or I've been getting into them lately, or new people were coming in. Not only were they chasing off the older fans, and they were doing it, I watched it. I was one of the people that they did it to. There's books that I've collected since the 90s and some since the 80s that I can't do anymore because they ruined it, and they don't want to take accountability for what they're doing. And people started asking, hey, Marvel, do you see how your employees are asking? I'm a customer, you see how they're treating me? It's the only. And they started making comparisons, like if you go to a restaurant and if a waiter or a cook treated you like this, that wouldn't fly, you know. And that's why it was people were looking at it as a business. Then it started getting really bigger. You still had people who were out there, you know, they were getting into the political and ideological fights to begin with. Yeah, and there's, like I said, Northern Monkey out here is saying, and this is the attitude started people getting. There's a huge group of people who don't get on social media because they have, you know, whatever, they have jobs, they have lives, they're a certain age where they just didn't really get into it. They just walked away, and I've talked about watching them, and some of them are, and my friends have done the same thing. They just walk away. Marvel's gone. Tell me when there's a regime change. Tell me when Axel's gone. Tell me when Dan's gone. Tell me when Heather Antos is gone. They had names, and that was the most amazing thing I've ever seen because it wasn't the people that I saw on the consumer side getting personal. It was the freaking people who worked at Marvel making it personal. And I think a lot of the critics and channels that I've seen, that's probably the only critique I had, is that you looked at the abyss for so long that you kind of get caught up in it and it looks back and it kind of changes you. And I've seen some things where it went from your channel calling out this bullshit that they were doing to where it's gotten real personal, you know. And some of it I've kind of, and there's been two or three things where I kind of wondered if it was like a work, like in wrestling. You know what I mean? Like, you know, they're kind of, some things might be working together, but I don't know. So people have had, so it's been the most amazing thing. It went from a hobby, it went from, hey, this is great what you're doing with your character, I didn't like this, and event fatigue, and all of a sudden they're trying to run off this audience so they can get an invisible audience in. And they ended up shooting themselves in the foot. It was the beginning of the real fall of Marvel, well, Axel Alonso's Marvel. I mean, I picture it like some kind of ridiculous movie, almost like a comedy where a car starts going down a cliff and it rolls and rolls and rolls and then it stops and then a bird lands on it and it rolls again and then it blows up, and just when you think it can't roll anymore, it just starts rolling again and keeps going on. Yeah, yeah, sticking to DC and Indies, and things started happening with Marvel, right? They ended up finding out that the invisible audience they wanted to get um, ended up boycotting them, even though they weren't buying the comics to begin with, because they found out that a CEO at Marvel gave $1 million to Trump and was buddies with him. But they couldn't really go after Marvel because in the trenches, the people who were making the comics and the writers and some of the artists and editors were their people. So all of a sudden, the audience they're trying to get was like, well, just kind of go away. They didn't know how to really handle it in an agreement. This guy, we don't want to give money to a person who supports Trump, but we can't go after them because of our people are in there. Yeah, and people are talking about comics getting political and stuff, right? And then it was the content. They were bringing up things that had nothing to do with the story. It was more about, I've never really figured out how they got by with it. But they have, you know, they had gods from myth talking about the Middle East and things that just didn't fit. Not that there's anything wrong with talking about that stuff, but it made absolutely no sense. You know, the content was getting insulting to the people that was reading it. It was starting to become the lowest common denominator. You had artists sneaking in their religious beliefs, like an X-Men Gold or whatever it was. You know, that was just a PR disaster. It was one PR disaster after the other, and then it finally happened. The retailers turned on Marvel at New York Comic Con, caught them, and said, "You're killing us." People go to the movies, They come out of the movies, come to a comic book shop, and they can't find the Marvel characters in the movies on the stands. And they have twisted all this stuff. They said, oh, we've heard we don't want this, we don't want diversity, we don't want that. And it turns out that all that stuff was misquoted and all that stuff was twisted, and they were doubling down. Yeah, stuff like that. So what has happened from what I've seen, people have walked away. People like me had a mourning period. I mourned. I went through the 7 stages of grief or whatever it is for Marvel and didn't even know it whenever I in the hobby and stuff. People walked away. People have gone to DC. People are now getting indies. They gave DC a whole new audience, and things like that. And they got there and they're liking what they find, they're giving it a chance. If even if they're not a hardcore DC fan, they're really digging it. And the indies books that they're finding for them and stuff, right? And this stuff kind of spread to IDW and some other stuff. It's almost like social media started turning into, putting a gun in your mouth, and these people just doubled down, and you ended up getting mobs on both sides and stuff. And what was going on? It's one of the most contradictory things. So then all of a sudden, the money spoke. All right, they were supposedly the reason we would have books, they would be a new #1 every few months, or we would have things. People started calling out Marvel for overshipping books when people didn't order them and counting them as sales. People started having event fatigue, and there were quarterly reports, that would show a profit. A profit that basically doesn't mean they were making money. It just means that they were spending as little money as they could making the comics, supposedly paying people cheaply, and then that's what made it look like a profit. It's not that they were making tons and tons and tons of money. It just means that they were, spending as little money as they could making the comic books, and anything else is above that is their profit. Okay, we're not talking about the profit of the '80s. When they were, selling tons and tons of books every month. When we had when we had Spider-Man #1 by Todd McFarlane make history by selling 1 million copies and stuff, right? But yeah, they were spinning these stories, and Mark Waid and all these people were like making news in like online articles, and I'm not going to go into comic book journalism, okay? So basically, the whole landscape turned into something that was really personal. You don't talk about politics and stuff at the dinner table and stuff, and here it is, just wide out in the open and stuff. And then you would see these comments from people from overseas. They're just like, well, we don't buy Marvel comics because we don't want to see that stuff. You know what I mean? It was a whole different thing for them. And then there's people who stuck in Marvel and they stayed positive and they found some books. And to be honest with you, the feedback I got is every time they found a book that was in its own little corner that didn't deal with this stuff, it would get ruined or abandoned and stuff, right? So the fiscal report comes out for this year. And like I said, I was actually contacted by 2 people from Marvel, which amazed me, and they told me who was nervous and who was running around. Nick Lowe supposedly was one of them, and all this stuff. And then a couple days later, the news broke. Axel Alonso is out. CB is in. And I've tweeted some articles just for me to go back where CB has made little statements here and there saying maybe it's not always the best idea to get political or for writers to put the political stuff that they feel through these characters and things like that. Joe Quesada did an interview yesterday. Yeah, well, yeah, quite a few creators are making fools of themselves on Twitters and elsewhere, and it's embarrassing. Yeah, and I'm going to talk about something about that in a minute. Sometimes when you hear from the few who speak up, it's what the invisible audience is feeling also. Following orders, don't lie. I think I have something to kind of fit in with that, right? Like I said, none of this is personal. None of this is personal. I'm not putting down any of these people and stuff, right? This is just an observation from a reader where they tried to make it personal with me and a bunch of other people for whatever reason. Almost like little kids wanting attention. They don't know the difference between positive attention and negative attention. You follow me? That's how I had to look at it and justify, like, what are they doing? They don't know the difference. They just want to be, it's almost like they just want to be Twitter famous. I don't know. Okay. So anyway, but, the report comes in, CB Lebowski comes in, and yesterday I see this article by Joe Quesada, who's going to be stepping in doing editorial work while CB moves from Singapore or whatever and gets settled and stuff like that. And I'm calling it, I read it, it was the most damage control thing I've ever seen. They said, hey, man, we had our most profitable years with Axel Alonso. Secret Empire was a disaster. There's tons of actual real life photos of those books of Secret Invasion and stuff, just being stacked up. Nobody was really buying them. The retailers were getting them. And you can go on back with all this stuff that went on and all these PR disasters that went on and stuff like that, right? And they're simply not selling as much books. And it was amazing that as soon as the news broke of Axel, I saw 3 or 4 articles where people were saying sales are down. After all these creators and all these other people were sitting there saying, no, no, there's no problem. And you go out into a comic book shop and you see the stacks of Marvel books, kind of worried about getting crushed at one point. Secret Empire, yeah. So anyway, but in the article that Joe Quesada that I read yesterday, he was talking about, hey, Axel did a great job and we were profitable and stuff like that. And I'm shaking my head like, why is he gone? Why is he gone? So they're just doing damage control. You can either keep digging into this Axel Alonso thing, or you can be positive and hope that CB coming in is going to, as a new editor in chief, and the new things that they're doing will be a positive change. One of Marvel's writers is on Twitter saying the political violence is okay and disagrees with hers. Or yeah, they call people names, to try to smear your reputation. It's all there. This isn't stuff that's alleged and stuff like that. You can go and see it. But anyway, Joe Quesada in that article was talking about Axel did a great job and all this stuff. Like, good, okay, whatever. Just okay, cool. Cool for not getting dirty and low and being positive and wishing him the best. But then as he went down, I saw a part where Joe Quesada was sitting there saying, hey, I'm having a great time. And I've been going down to the offices and having seminars and talking about pacing in comics and comic covers and how to do comics and stuff. And I read that as in like, so you have professionals who are working in your offices in comics and all this stuff, and you're having to go down there and tell them how to do their job and take them to comic book school. Good start. It's a good start. We'll say that's positive. We'll say that's positive. You're not wanting to admit it that the people you have really screwed up and they got their head in the wrong place and stuff like that. Okay, good, good. Nobody is getting smeared here. No, they're trying to keep it classy, and you got to give them a chance. That's how my feelings about it. You got to give them a chance. I'm reading through some of this stuff. The bullshit is obvious. I've watched it for years. I've kept my mouth shut. I've seen big channels come on, and the audience would have always been there if we went that way with it and stuff like that. And now there's damage control going on, and they're bringing in a man, CB. Can't remember his last name right now. People often criticize the old creators who saw it as a job, but whose stuff are we buying now? Their stuff. When you see yourself bigger than the industry, your workdays are numbered. Could be. Ego's a terrible thing, but there's then people like Frank Miller and stuff like that who became huge stars because they had that confidence. You know what I mean? If you take, even as an artist, an inker, or whatever it is like that, you've got to be able to like knock it. You got to have the confidence to knock it out of the bat every time, even if you're just drawing a simple horizon line. You know what I mean? You can pick up as a reader a good artist. You know what I mean? It's like one of those things you get so good, you get so used to seeing professional art, stuff like that, you don't think about it. But by God, you can pick up that bad artist because they didn't have the confidence to draw a line. You know what I mean? So the ego might be a little necessary to show confidence. If Joe wants to become the most popular man in the industry, all he has to do is let CB undo one more day. Yeah, and that's what I mean. What are my thoughts on diversity in comics? I got 2 comments there. Diversity in comics. I check out his channel every now and then. And a couple months ago, I did a video where I named a bunch of these critics that were coming up. These guys that were in the trenches in the fight that ended up becoming called Comicsgate. And they're necessary. Okay? The thing about it is that they make excellent points. When they're on the ball, I like it when they're on the ball and they do their stuff. But I've always said I don't agree with tactics that come out there. I'm not one of those people that can get on Twitter and get into the arguments and go back and forth and stuff. I can make a statement here, I can make a statement there. So that's what I mean. I'm not slamming those channels at all. But with what Marvel had been pulling for years and for what they were doing, this was the natural reaction. You know what I mean? For everything that happens, you get a reaction. What is that? Cause and reaction or something like that. So to me, the people on the other side, of those channels and stuff like that are the ones that have played dirty. I started out saying there was no good guys in this because it was going to be a dirty fight if they got into it. And lo and behold, through the actions of these comic book creators on Twitter with actual receipts, because Diversity Comics calls them receipts and stuff like that. They have the receipts, they have the screenshots, they have the threats that the creators have made, they have all this stuff and stuff like that, and the proof is in the pudding. What I think is, though, is that once you fight that fight and you get out there and you're doing this stuff, it's going to get personal and you're going to lose sight a little bit. And that's more not a critique, but that's one of the things that I've been involved in real life as a social worker, where you get so deep into something like that you've got to step back and remember why you're doing this and what's your cause. If anything, I just throw out some advice from real life experience. These are grown men. They don't need my advice. You know what I mean? But it's one of those things that if we end up talking, that's what it'd be. So yeah, these channels are necessary to kind of show the underbelly. And I really think that they lucked up with these creators really showing how underhanded they can get. And that's one of the things I hope Marvel is aware of and changes. They're trying to get Marvel to get a blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there's things like that that I don't agree with personally. I think you'll get what I'm about to say here. My thing is I'm still from here's how comics work. Here's how I think about writing and stuff like that. They're talking about a gender or race equaling writing for a character and stuff from a point of view and stuff. To a certain extent, I get it. There's a point of view that would be good to be in there. But when Jim Shooter was 13 years old, he was basically, his scripts for the Legion of Superheroes he was mailing in were, I think, I've heard that they were nothing but, typing paper, and he was loosely drawing the story, and he was writing the word balloons, and he would send them in, and they were making them. He's doing the job for about a year or two or something like that, and they call him up, and they're saying, okay, man, we need you to come up here to New York. We're having a meeting. And he said, I don't know if I can do that. And the editor the person talking to him caught on and said, how old are you? And he had to tell him he was 14 years old. Okay? So they worked that out. My point of that is that Jim Shooter got a writing gig at DC through talent and merit. You know what I mean? He had that burning desire to do it. He had the talent to do it, and he sent it in. And they didn't know who he was or what he was and stuff like that. So that's what I think people need to realize is that you either got it or you don't. It doesn't matter your gender or anything like that. I mean, it really doesn't. You either got it or you don't. It does, and that's the danger. That's one of the things that has drove Marvel into the ground over the last few years, is because of those kind of hires, where it was more about. Okay, I'm not going to say what it was more about, but I'm going to say it was not about talent. It was not about your merit and being in the trenches and stuff. Okay. I mean, that's the best way to put it, man. I'm not here to wave a flag or to jump in the trenches and fight a war or anything like that, but they're doing seminars at Marvel now, according to Joe Quesada, to show people about covers and pacing and basically how to do a comic book. I mean, the proof's in the pudding. There's no argument here. So basically, Alonso's come in. When he came in and stuff like that, he achieved a lot of great stuff at Vertigo and stuff. And CB comes in, and people are saying he's the one. It's amazing. The Runaways. He did a book. CB brought in a book called The Runaways as the editor or something like that by Brian K. Vaughan. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the Runaways TV show has hit Hulu around the same time that CB gets announced for it. It's one of his successes. It's almost one of those things to look at the fans and say, oh, he did the Runaways, and they took a chance, and the Runaways show seems to be getting good reviews. All this is very well put together. Yeah. I get what you're saying, man. I actually get what you're saying there. But, I said I'm not going to get into that. Yeah, and hopefully CB will come in. So CB has come in, and he's been doing diplomatic work. Basically, it's the best way to put it, over in Asia, is what they've been telling us. They're telling us that he's over there building the Marvel franchise and getting the books out into Asia and getting to know the audience, or whatever his job is. But apparently he's been doing it well enough that they skipped Tom Brevoort and they gave it to CB. So this guy knows how to come in and finesse a situation. This guy went to a whole different culture cultures. You know what I'm saying? And apparently he's been very successful over there. They were happy with his work and stuff. So this guy's going to come back over here, and to me, as a consumer, as a reader, as a person who described old Marvel back in the day, hey, Dr. Silver Ace, what's going on? They're bringing in a guy who apparently has, oh man, hey, what's up, Harrington? Cool. But so they're bringing in a man who apparently is a bit of a diplomat. You know what I mean? He's apparently is able to handle people. He is obviously able to smooth things over. He's a fixer, right? And what I'm hoping about a fixer is you got to be careful here, because when you bring in a fixer, they're temporary. They're to come in and to repair damage and then hand it off to somebody else when everything's fixed. And with the last couple decade and a half of Marvel, we need somebody there that's going to stay there. Yeah, Zio Gold, they've been doing some terrible stuff to some of those critic channels, okay? So that's what I'm getting at here, man. Okay, I hope CB isn't just a fixer. You know what I mean? Come in, I want to fix this up. He knows Marvel. He knows how to smooth things over. He's been doing great work overseas with, different cultures and stuff. So the man is a people person, or whatever his talent is. But when you bring in a fixer, like I said, it's to hand the reins off to somebody else. Your job is just to come in and to fix things, and I hope that's not what he is. You cannot, if CB comes in there and fixes these problems and he's aware of these problems and get these books going again and things that are going, you can't just hand it off to anybody. Okay, so I hope there's a plan. There's got to be somebody underneath him. If that's what I'm speculating, I'm not saying he's a temporary fix, but when you get that power going and I feel like he is going to smooth things over, you can't just hand it off to anybody. He needs to have somebody by his side. He needs to have a sidekick, an intern, whatever, somebody, whatever. I think he needs somebody there to for him to be under his wing, be an assistant, so they can see what he's going. CB is target to these guys. They will try to get him fired or worse, right? Well, I don't know. I mean, I know there's going to with any job, whenever you get a new boss, somebody's going to want to test them. You know what I mean? And after what I've seen on Twitter versus what some of these people do in real life and stuff like that, you can't say it's not going to happen. But people do tend to be much braver behind the keyboard. You know what I mean? So that would be real interesting. And I really feel like that with the crap that they let these people get by with now and things like that, that one person needs to be made an example out of. If I was a boss coming in, you know, I'd have to make an example out of one person to show everybody else. I don't know if he's a fixer. This is a guy who scouted and found all the talent that works on the new generation books. Yeah, and that's what yeah. And that was in all the articles, and they talked about him stuff, and people praising they found some good talent and stuff like that, right? My whole point was I'm hoping they're not expecting him to just be a fixer and then go on. You know what I mean? And for one of the things, exactly what you said, he can spot talent. He's able to put together teams, is what they're saying. It's almost like he knows human chemistry. And I'm telling you, this guy sounds like a people person. Cool. Who found all the terrible talents? Well, that's speculation on who brought in who. They found these people on the indie market. Marvel no longer has a submission department. They find them. Marvel will come to you. Apparently they find you on Tumblr and some indie book or this or that or whatever. They'll find you online, basically, is what it's coming from. They bring you in. I don't know. That's one of the things that's almost like that's one of the secrets. Now, some of the positive things that have come out, we've talked about speculation. Marvel knows they needed a change. If the firing of Alonso was merely cosmetic, they would have just promoted Brevoort. Yeah, and that's one of the things that people see. Some of this stuff is just common sense. We may not know exactly what the situations were, but people are in the know enough to know something wasn't right. You know what I mean? They'll never admit anything. Yeah, and that's okay. That's a real good point here. I don't think Brevoort wants it. That could be a thing. Tom Brevoort may have been offered it and didn't want it. We don't know. Good point. Yeah, Hitler Antos was found on Tumblr. Okay. I don't know what happens to Brevoort now. Brevoort seems to have actually does seem to come off like having respect. I mean, I don't know these people. There's actually people, I don't know these people, and I don't want to speculate too much. Because like I said, none of this is personal. Again, some of these creators tried to make it personal, I feel like, and I'm just not going to do it. I mean, this is one of the first times I've actually openly talked about it and stuff. I've tried to take in the information. I've tried to see what was going on here. I've looked a little bit there. I've never tried to jump the gun, but enough, change finally happened, and everybody saw it coming. They were just getting frustrated with like, when is it going to happen? So I think one of the things is like the damage control is showing that it's popular. Now, some of the other things as a positive that's come out of this is I got asked about Ethan Van Sciver. He does Comic Artist Pro channel or something like that. And again, it's one of those channels that I check out a video every now and then, or he'll have like a live stream announced or something, and I'm right on it and stuff. And he's had Dan Slott on there. He's had Kevin McGuire and Keith Giffen on there, which I enjoyed that one very much, where they gave you a behind the scenes. They took one of their books and kind of gave you, funny annotations on it, how it was made and stuff like that. Oh, he had some great artist on there the other night and stuff like that. But I'm gonna go ahead and tell you, I used to follow Ethan Van Sciver on Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that, and I had to unfollow him because he was a completely different beast back then. And then, of course, you had the scandal where they're trying to say that he was a Nazi supporter. He shut down one of his Facebook's channels or something like that. And what does the guy do? He comes in, he gets positive on his channels. He's putting out some good stuff. He's putting out some good advice. He's able to talk to some of these creators because he has a relationship with them on Twitter that's entertaining for us. And we're like, damn, and all that stuff like that. He's the guy that really turned it around. So I think what he's doing is great. I have no question about his sincerity. I have no question about what else he wants to do because it's none of my business. But I enjoy his stuff. I enjoy his artwork. I always have. And I've enjoyed these videos he has. I mean, I'm not going to go overboard and be like, oh, he's my favorite channel and stuff, man. No, no, he's had some stuff where it just wasn't for me, man. But man, when he nails it, he nails it. Okay, yeah, he's a great artist. So there's a guy with a talent and stuff like that. And so yeah, man. I mean, his stuff with Blackest Night and stuff, the Sinestro War Core, hell yeah, yeah. People are going to be triggered no matter what. You can't make everybody happy. That's one of the problems. Okay, Samantha Parrington said that Ethan Van Sciver nailed the Squirrel Girl piece. Oh, go back and watch that. Okay. I'm getting messages on my phone also and stuff. Hopefully I can stay on here and stuff like that. So anyway, there's just been, like I said, just the last couple of years of Marvel. I've made videos where I even said I'll be curious on how history looks back on this. And it's just amazing how, here's the deal. It's just amazing how quick we're starting to see how it's remembered. To expand on what I said previously, what makes them so untouchable, they are given carte blanche and attack their audience on social media and further alienate their product. Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I was trying to kind of touch on and be clear, and you put it much better. Yeah, time to go back to the basics. Writing and art will bring the fans back. Yeah, and like I said, you're absolutely right, but there is a faction of the fans who have just walked away and they just want to be told when there's a regime change. You know what I mean? This is the social media. People take it personally when they feel like they're attacked by somebody they've given their money to. You know what I mean? Um, it's just all I'm giving is a perspective of it, man. I don't think I have all the answers and the ins and outs and stuff, right? Like what we were talking about with Tom Brevoort. Maybe he did get offered and turned it down. We don't know. Yeah. Um, so, oh, I lost my train of thought here for a minute, stuff. But anyway, I know it just amazes me that like I'll see people have just like, oh my God, there'll be something that some kind of news will hit or some kind of some movie will bomb or something like that, and people will just be all up in arms or something really bad. And the way with this, how social media works nowadays and stuff like that, all you got to do is wait 5 minutes, and then people will jump on the next thing that's like controversial and stuff, and you forget about it. Marvel has been the exception. It's almost like there's been a scorecard that people don't even have to mark on. They just know, and they don't. The things Marvel has done and said and misquoted and everything like that has not gone away from people. That's one of the reasons I think they want a regime change. I think Marvel as a company is lucking up that Marvel is just being set as an umbrella. They don't blame the company. They're actually saying this guy said this guy's Twitter is awful, this guy did this, and this lady did this, and did you see what she did? thanks to the social media, it's like they know who said what, and they have the screenshots and all this stuff, and they don't want to give money to those people. They don't want them, I don't. They want to buy a comic book and be reminded of them and stuff. This is, like I said, the first time I've ever seen something like this get so personal and sales go so down and stuff. And of course, there's a big part of the quality of the Marvel comics, their sales and stuff over the last few years. Um, like I've seen some of the editors refer to these books as their babies, but they didn't promote them till they were over with. Go buy the trade. Wasp is gone and all this stuff. Brevoort is old guard enough to be a dumpster fire when he sees it. He's smart enough probably not to try to fix it. I could see that. I could see that where somebody is like, I don't know if I want to handle this mess right now. Yeah, I can see that. I think what they were saying is that Tom Brevoort realizes things were such a mess, he didn't want to be the guy to come in and try to fix it. You know, So yeah, yeah. And there's a lot to be. If that's a problem, if that's something that went through his head, I'll commend him, man, because like you don't want to come in and make something worse. If you know your limitations, I think that's a good thing. Give the benefit of the doubt. Marvel has done a change, and I want to try to stay positive about it, not naive or anything like that. All right, guys, we've been talking for 50 minutes. I don't know if we got anything out of this and stuff. It was fun. Love the people that are here, man. Word on the street is She-Hulk movie is in the works. Let's hope the movie is based off the 89 to 94 run comics. That'd be awesome. Once upon a time, Tom Brevoort was a damn good editor. Yeah, okay. Oh, thanks, Samantha. Great talk, Samantha Parrington. Thanks, Mr. Mills. Hey, thanks. Appreciate it, guys. All right, guys. I'm going to jump off here. I got some messages to answer on my phone, and you guys have a happy Thanksgiving tomorrow, man. This is outstanding, man. Over 30 people were in this live stream tonight, and I appreciate you guys. All right, thanks, guys. Hey, thanks. Hey, Shinto's here. All right, man. Good to see you. All right, guys. Later.